Hey everyone, it's Rhinne, and today I'm going to be telling you guys how I believe you should be playing Azumarill, starting with their item set. The only mandatory item on them is going to be Buddy Barrier. Buddy Barrier on their extremely spammable ults, being the lowest cooldown in the game, is very strong. On top of this, they self-damage and are a frontliner, so you kind of need the extra beefiness in order to stay in the fights, in order to do your damage, because they take a long time to ramp up their damage. Outside of this, I've been testing quite a few items, and I'm not really sold on any one set at the moment. I can tell you what the good items are. I've been running attack weight and weakness policy recently, but there are other good items as well, such as Muscle Band is very good for your auto attack since you auto a lot. Scope Lens is very good since you crit extremely often with your passive. Energy Amp can be okay, and then Focus Band can be good as well. It just depends on what you need. I've been liking attack weight and weakness policy for the attack scaling, especially combined with their ult. I've been playing them more as an ult spot to just like ult and run down people as like an assassin. For battle items, I've been testing both full heal and X speed. I believe both have merit, but I've been enjoying full heal more than I have X speed. With that said, I believe X speed does have situational uses, so you can test out both and see what you prefer. I think they're both good and they're both viable. With that said, let's move on to their skills. So we can't start talking about Azumarill without talking about their passive. So their passive makes it so if you ever hit a single target, your move is guaranteed to crit. But if you come over here and you hit multiple targets, your moves are guaranteed to never crit. As you can see, none of that crit. If I come over here and I hit this doll, it will 100% crit. So this is a fundamental part of her kit that is very important to her gameplay. Let's talk about her actual abilities. First ability is either going to be leveled up as Bubble or Tackle. Honestly, given her clear and her passive, it doesn't really matter what you take first because you'll clear fast enough anyway. Tackle is just a short dash that has like a 0.25 second stun on it. Not really that complicated. Just use it. Bubble is a ranged attack that has a slow on it that has multiple hits. For an easy way to be able to hit all of its parts, you can either walk up super close to the enemy, or you can start from where it starts to fan, which is on the right side, and then move over down toward the left, like so. And hit it all like that for maximum damage. This also makes it easier to last hit minions in lane if you end up using it like this. Like so. And once you hit level 5, you can choose between Whirlpool or Aqua Tail. I've been liking Whirlpool more, personally, but I'll describe both. So Whirlpool is this little spinny thing around it. Think of it as like passive damage. It also heals you. Now, there's an important feature of Whirlpool, which is... You see those little Whirlpools? Those are what dictate how much damage it does. So you can see how it's ticking right now, right? I was ticking pretty slow, but then if I go like this, it'll tick faster. So if you start moving clockwise around the enemy, it'll tick even faster. But if you move counterclockwise, it'll tick super slow. See how it's doing no damage right now? One other important thing to note about Whirlpool is that you get less healing against mobs like Ludicolo or Apom or whatever than you do against player characters. They won't heal as much when you're in bees or whatever, fighting there. So now let's talk about Aqua Tail. So Aqua Tail is a buff to your auto attacks, and it makes your auto attacks these weird cone things, and you get 3 extra hits. If you hit those in the sweet spot, they'll do more damage, and they will heal you. You see the sweet spot there. If you don't hit them in the sweet spot, I believe they do less damage than your basic attack. Let me check. Yep. So you have to hit them in the sweet spot, otherwise you're kind of griefing yourself. On top of this, it has another gimmick. It can ignore defense and it can ignore shields if hit in the sweet spot, which can be nice for killing people past Buddy Barrier. Think like Charizard when he attacks a burned target. That being said, I think Aqua Tail has too long of a cooldown and is too gimmicky to land for it to realistically be used. Keep in mind when you're doing Aqua Tail, you're not having time to actually auto attack. So the damage you see here, while it does look big, remember you could be auto attacking this whole time. Those 315s could be 334s right there. And I hit for 417 instead of 600 or whatever it is, right? 631. So I'm only gaining like 200 damage. That's really not that much. Once we hit level 7, we can choose between either Water Pulse or Play Rough. Play Rough is complete garbage. It's like Volt Tackle but worse. It gives a slight move speed buff when you take it. But it's so bad, I'm honestly not even going to mention or take it here and demonstrate it. It's just god awful in its current state. It does no damage. You can be CC'd during it. You don't have Unstoppable. It's really, really bad. They're going to have to buff it for it to ever see play. Also, on top of that, you can't combine it with Aqua Tail, so you can only play it with Whirlpool, and I don't think it's very good with Whirlpool because Water Pulse has a special interaction with Whirlpool that I'll demonstrate in a second. So Water Pulse is a little blob ball that you shoot out that can bounce between targets, if I demonstrate it over here. That you can also dash when you use. As you can see, it bounces back and forth, and you get a little dash from it. So it's pretty nice. That can be used to reposition your Aqua Tail, and it can be used for you to be able to hit even more Whirlpools. So I mentioned earlier that Water Pulse is a nice interaction with Whirlpool. So if you remember me talking about Whirlpools, actual Whirlpools being the one that dictates damage, well, if you use Water Pulse to get around the target, you can do even more damage. So what we want to do is do this, and then every time we Whirlpool, or every time we Water Pulse, you want to go through like that to do even more damage. Just do it even faster. You can do massive burst damage like this. Or just go through or whatever, right? Just make sure you're running it into the actual Whirlpools every single time you use the dash. And you're good to go. Another aspect of Water Pulse, we mentioned before that it bounces, but you can use this for extreme burst. Like so. It does nutty damage if you can get enemies really close to each other. Now that we've talked about all our basic abilities, let's talk about their ult. So their ult is simultaneously extremely good and extremely bad. So we'll talk about the bad first. The bad is it's extremely short range, and once it's targeted on the ground and it starts attacking, it doesn't follow the target. So this means that they can flash out of it extremely easily and avoid the damage. The good is that you get an insanely strong attack buff. And you do way more damage. If you look at that, my Whirlpools went all the way up to, I think it was like 328 per tick, which is pretty insane. Look at that. Look at that damage. And that's without any attack weight 6, that's without weakness policy, and I'm only level 10. And you see how fast they're ticking. Look at that. It's pretty nutty. It also knocks up a bunch of targets in between, but that's not really too relevant because most of the time when you're using this, as you can see, it's pretty hard to get people in between. The one thing you can do is you can eject button to try and get more people in the thing. So you can think of this like someone mentioned in my chat earlier, like a reverse Blissey ult. So that could be one use for eject button that I actually didn't mention earlier. So potentially you could run eject button as well. Remember that the ult charge for this is extremely low. The lowest in the game currently. It's like 80 seconds or so. So you can use this all the time. Look, I'm going to kill one mob. I'm at 4%, 5%. I went all the way up to 11% instantly. I'm already at 15%. That's insane. I can kill these 4 and I'll pretty much have my ult back after I dunk. Remember, you want to hard spam this ult as much as possible. That is one of the biggest strengths of Azumarill, is their spammable ult. Now that we've talked about what their skills do and their items, let's move on to gameplay. Azumarill can be played either top or jungle, and I think they're both about as viable as each other currently. Your early game is pretty bad. You want to try and look for secures, but outside of that, you don't really want to try and fight. If they stand on top of wild Pokemon, remember that you won't be able to crit them, so that's kind of bad. You can aim bubble away from the enemy, but still on top of wild Pokemon, so positioning yourself between a wild Pokemon and the enemy, and then firing it backwards, so where you can still get the crits from bubble and try to secure the last hit like that. If you can find trades away from wild Pokemon and the enemy is not positioning on top of them, you will probably win those trades given that you're going to crit everything. But if you can't find those trades, then you want to just continue playing for last hit and playing kind of passively, pretty much. Azumarill's weakest point is going to be first Bs, so try and play first Bs pretty safe. You can use Tackle to get out if need be. Try to look for some last hits with Bubble, and if your jungle ends up carrying in the fight, well then I guess that's nice. Something you can consider in the early game is you can look to potentially play extremely aggressively with your attack weight and try to score if you are running that. Even if you fall slightly behind in lane, it's not too big of a deal. Getting those dunks off is going to help you a lot more in the later stages of the game, especially as you're spamming your ults to try and garner catch-up EXP if you need it. In the mid game, once you get Water Pulse and Whirlpool, you can start dueling people finally. Water Pulse can be used to poke people out as well as burst objectives. Remember that when people are clumped together with Water Pulse, it does extremely high amounts of damage extremely quickly. So if you can fight someone in like a 2v1 scenario or they're right next to a wild Pokemon, you can just throw Water Pulse on them and it'll bounce between them and do lots of damage so you can assassinate them. Whirlpool is very good DPS to objectives and to wild Pokemon. So you can use it to DPS, say Dreadnought or Rotom extremely quickly, or you can use it to secure things really quickly, or you could even use it to dive towers because it's very good damage on enemies as well. Once you get your ult, you want to try using it pretty much on cooldown. It has the lowest recharge in the game. It's at like 80 or so seconds, which is absolutely ridiculous. So you can have it up for pretty much every fight. You just want to spam it on cooldown. You can get like 6 ults off a game, which is insane. When your ult is up, you want to think of yourself as an assassin. So when you ult, you gain a large attack buff from it, and you'll also get right on top of the enemy, and then you'll also gain the move speed buff. So you can use all of these together in order to essentially one-shot enemies or kill them extremely quickly. Once you make it to the late game around the Zapdos timer, in team fights, you have 2 options. You either want to play it as an AoE bruiser, where you hit giant clumps of enemies with like Whirlpool and Water Pulse and your ult, or you want to try and isolate a 1v1 on a squishy target. So say a Ninetales or something, you see them isolated, you just run at them, you ult them, and you try to kill them before the fight even happens. If you're trying to play the fight as an AoE bruiser, try and wait out the enemy buddy bears before you go in, or try to somehow force the enemy buddy bears before you go in. Remember that you can use Water Pulse to try and poke them out to get them a little bit low, especially if they're grouped up. You're extremely squishy without buddy barrier, and honestly you're pretty easy to run down as well without ulting, so try to be careful of your positioning. Water Pulse isn't really going to save you, it doesn't have enough mobility, and the slow isn't good enough to stop you from getting run down by, like, say a red buff Cinderace, for example. Anyway, that's it for this guide. If you guys have any questions, you can ask down in the comments below. I'll be streaming Azumarill gameplay on Twitch, so you can check out my Twitch, that'll be down in the description below. Like this kind of content, like, comment, subscribe, help with the algorithm, help me out personally so I can grow the channel. And until next time, take care.